it's Matthew Griffin, better known as the Fanatical Futurist. Do you want to get down and dirty, basically, with some science fiction-like technologies, basically, that actually just aren't science fiction-like because they're actually science fact? So, if you do, sit then stay tuned. Now, firstly, thank you to everyone who's been subscribing to my two YouTube channels, so the 311 Institute YT channel, as well as the Fanatical Futurist YT channel, because recently we picked up not one award, but two awards. So there we go. So thank you for that. And that now means that over 10 million people have now seen the future. So when I first set out to do this, I tried to democratize access to the future. So for a variety of reasons, you wouldn't have to pay $15,000 basically to some Californian company to actually see what's ahead of us, what's coming, and how to prepare for it. And 10 million of you, well, you now know a lot more than the vast majority of everyone else on the planet. So, with no more to say, let's get into it. Okay, so this is my fanaticalfuturist.com blog. So, if you go to the website, you can see all these different news articles. It's updated daily, and it's been a little while basically since I actually recorded myself actually having a conversation with you about these different sort of news topics that I've actually seen emerge. But here we go. Okay, so we're going to go backwards in time. We're going to go back to September 24th, 2024, which is the last session that I did. Now, so Meta recently announced that it's actually launched its Sapiens artificial intelligence model. Now, the reason why this is important is this is an artificial intelligence model that is able to independently create masks of human movements, actions, and everything else. Now, some of these look at the human movement from depth perspectives, heat perspectives, 2D perspectives, all that kind of stuff. But fundamentally, what Meta is trying to achieve here is they're trying to create an artificial intelligence model that, on the one hand, can thoroughly understand why humans move in the way that we do. Secondly, track them. So basically, if you can track movements accurately and what people are doing accurately, then you can create better analytics for those people. And there's a whole different way. There's a whole bunch of different ways that Meta can actually monetize that. But thirdly, if you have an artificial intelligence model that understands human behaviors and human movements intimately, then you can then transpose anything from a video into a virtual reality avatar. And ultimately, let's not forget that Mark Zuckerberg spent, what, $6 to $7 billion building the metaverse, which kind of went away, but it's not gone away. Now, what else have we got? So Japan, now this is actually the second one of these we've seen. So Japan has announced that they're going to build the world's first, and I'll come on to the other one in a moment, first Zettascale artificial intelligence supercomputer. Now, for anyone that is familiar with high performance computers, and computing platforms, you'll know that we're kind of at the exascale at the moment. So these are exaflop scale platforms. However, when we're talking about artificial intelligence, the way that we do high performance computing LinPack testing, which is based on a shorter, essentially data packet for a variety of reasons, a shorter pack, means that an artificial intelligence Zeta scale computing platform is not necessarily more powerful than the world's exascale supercomputer platforms. However, as we've seen in Japan, Oracle have now got a Zettascale supercomputer as well. What this really shows us is that there are quite a lot of companies and governments that are just building phenomenally huge artificial intelligence dedicated supercomputing platforms, which they can then use to run different simulations, create new materials, create new drugs, turbocharge basically their military apparatus, all these kinds of different things. So lots of reasons basically that actually we kind of like a Zettascale AI supercomputer. Now, by economy, so over here, in 2025, we're obviously going to be hearing a lot more about agentic artificial intelligence. So agentic artificial intelligence you can think of as little AI bots collaborating with one another under the management of a gigantic artificial intelligence, should we say, mothership model. Now, why this is particularly interesting is because we've seen two artificially intelligent bots, again, transact money with one another. So these I've spoken about before. They're called deferred authorization networks, but this is where we move from I, as a human, buying a product or service and then using my PayPal account, for example, to pay for something, to me as a human buying something and my artificial intelligence paying for it with my money, or an artificial intelligence buying something for itself, so compute, resource, human slaves, whatever, with another artificial intelligence to do something. So this starts opening up the concept of a true, pure, and native artificial intelligence driven economy. The ramifications of which are stunning, and I might be in Miami next month talking about how AI destroys the global economy, just for a little bit of fun. Now, what have we got down here? So, breakthrough, new process converts electricity into biological energy. Now, anyone in the energy sector knows that typically what we do at the moment is we take excess energy from renewable energy sources like wind and solar. We then store that excess energy in, for example, lithium ion batteries, iron flow batteries. There's lots of different kinds of grid scale storage platforms out there, including water that I've talked about basically many, many times before. This is new because researchers have actually used biomanufacturing and genetic engineering technologies like CRISPR to enable that energy from, for example, a wind turbine to be stored as biological molecules. So biological ATP molecules, which literally without ATP in your body, you would be dead. So this is quite an interesting twist on the future of grid scale energy storage. It's also slightly science fiction like. Now, on a slightly less science fiction like note, we've got researchers in Norway who've created phase change materials. So you can put these phase change materials into things like concrete and tarmac. And these phase change materials, when they hit a certain temperature, they start warming themselves up automatically. And in this case, they melt snow. So even though we see a lot of global warming coming through, there are still parts of the world that struggle basically with ice and snow. This next one here, a Chinese artificial intelligence has used a clever tactic to win a Mach 11 simulated dogfight is nuts. So in this particular sort of military simulation, the Chinese wanted to see what would happen if you had two drones going head to head, or two fifth or sixth generation fighter jets going head to head. One was supersonic or hypersonic. So, for example, one of the jets basically was going at either supersonic speed or hypersonic speed, which is up to kind of like Mach 5. The other, in this case, drone, was flying around the skies, the simulated skies, at Mach 11. Now, the problem that you kind of have is if you're in a Mach 11 jet, how do you fundamentally shoot a Mach 5 jet when you've gone past it before you've even blinked? Now, in this particular example, artificial intelligence came up with a very, very novel answer. It screamed past the Mach 5 jet, a little bit like Tom Cruise in Top Gun, and it then launched a missile. However, the clever bit is it launched the missile essentially over its shoulder to hit the Mach 5 jet as it came into its airspace. So this is literally the equivalent of running past someone and then throwing a rock over your shoulder basically as you're running past them to smack them in the face. Nuts, just nuts. And then we've got some sort of cybersecurity news here. So increasingly, we're starting to see more and more state-sponsored actors pretending to be developers, either developing or helping develop open source code. We saw the XYZ exploit, which was an exploit which would have undermined almost all Linux-based open source software and given backdoors to the people who put the backdoors in. They took 2 years to very slowly manipulate the open source code so that it wasn't actually that easy to identify. Um, and so increasingly, we're seeing state-sponsored spies and actors posing as software developers in a variety of different guises, essentially so they can break the software that we use on a daily basis and do bad stuff. Now, when we have a look at things like 3D printing, University of Oxford has developed a new solar material which can be 3D printed, except it's so thin you can print it onto absolutely anything. So for example, if you go camping today, you typically take these little solar panels with you, and you'll plug your phone in, put these little solar panels basically next to you on a picnic mat or whatever it happens to be while they charge your phone. This does away with that because you can 3D print solar panels, fabric, into the fabric, basically, of whatever it is that you're carrying about, like a backpack. So this is where we end up with self-charging clothing, self-charging bags. It's just a different way to charge your gadgets. A much more transparent and cleaner way to do it as well. China's LED radar. Now, not many people really bother paying any attention to radars, but over the past year to 2 years, we've seen the development of some quite funky new quantum radar systems, especially in China, Austria. The UK, Canada, and US are starting to catch up, but principally a lot of the latest radar developments are actually from China because China has a vested interest in trying to break US stealth, especially around the South China Seas. Now, this one will have gone unnoticed, I think, by a lot of people, but China used a relatively conventional radar to spot a plasma bubble 5,900 miles away over the top of the pyramids of Giza. Now, on the one hand, plasma bubbles form when storms are being created, so thunderstorms. So this does have atmospheric and weather-based applications. However, plasma bubbles are also formed around the nose cone of hypersonic missiles. So while this could actually look like a breakthrough in weather radar, it could also very well be, and sort of is, a breakthrough in using radar to identify the plasma bubbles and envelopes around hypersonic missiles up to 6,000 miles away, which Chinese artificial intelligence and defense systems can then target and try to destroy. So that's a sort of a dual use technology there. Then the last three here, again, China. So on 28th of September, the Chinese sort of researchers, part of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, announced that they had managed to use a quantum computer to crack standard 256 AES military grade encryption, but they did it in a few minutes. Now, a little while ago, I did a post on an event that took place in the United States where certain US government databases looked like they'd been decrypted because the US government essentially was, how did this get hacked? How did everyone's information get out into the wild? And they called Microsoft in and everything else. And quite a lot of different members of the US national intelligence community got together, started freaking out because they thought just someone, China, had actually used a quantum computer to crack 256 AES bit encryption. Now fast forward probably about 5 months, and the Chinese are saying that they've actually done it. Now, we've been talking about Q-Day basically for a very long time, and typically it's been thought you need a quantum computer with 10,000 qubits that's highly accurate in order to crack really any kind of encryption. I've also talked about cracking 4,096-bit encryption with quantum computers in about 8 hours before. So Q-Day is coming. However, while this was actually picked up by a lot of networks, there's a lot of skepticism that it's real. When it comes to China and what they publish, I myself am a little bit skeptical, but nevertheless, they're saying they've done it, so it's something that we need to be aware of and we need to be preparing and planning for, whether you're a business, or whether you're an individual basically who is sharing sensitive information. For example, I know a few individuals, basically like reporters and journalists, basically that simply don't want their information stores cracked for a variety of different reasons. So we've got that. Now, on the 26th, basically of September, we saw China successfully recover some reusable satellites. Now, while the United States, for example, and other countries like India are focused on trying to develop reusable rockets like the SpaceX Falcon 9, the Heavy, the New Glenn from Blue Origin, and so on and so forth, China basically has been sort of taking the next step to try to develop reusable satellites. And now, traditionally, what happens is a satellite goes into orbit, runs out of fuel, crashes down to Earth. Now, we do have some robotic refueling systems from companies like Lockheed Martin that have been successfully tested to try to keep those satellites up in orbit. But this concept of a reusable satellite, it's quite interesting. It's also quite tricky to do. So that's a sort of interesting thing. And then when we have a look at automatic takeoffs are coming. So Bombardier, who are the Brazilian sort of Airbus equivalent, have just launched their first and latest fully autonomous commercial airline takeoff system. So what we mean by this is, as a pilot, you sit it, as a pilot and the co-pilot, you sit in the cockpit like this, and the plane takes off by itself. Now, the last time that that was done was about 2 to 3 years ago, basically at Charles de Gaulle with Airbus, who did a fully autonomous takeoff of a A320neo. However, with Bombardier looked like they're actually going to start rolling this out in earnest. And as for Airbus's sort of aspirations for fully autonomous takeoffs and landings and so on and so forth, they've been scanning over 100 airports so they can train their artificial intelligences on those airports, where the buildings are, all that kind of stuff. So even though this is a very slow upticking trend, there is this constant drive and this constant momentum to try to create fully autonomous, from start to finish, commercial aircraft. And that's it. And then, down here, if you want to see what the rest of this page actually has in store, then just simply click the next video in this playlist and you can see what all the other sort of emerging technology news and snippets basically that I've been looking at and writing about basically actually mean for human business, culture and society. And as for me, thank you very much for listening to this. Enjoy the future. And this is just the beginning. Take care. Goodbye.